Christmas Eve dinner at the Morrison family estate had always been a formal affair, but this year felt different. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife as I sat at the far end of the mahogany table, watching my family exchange meaningful glances. My father, William Morrison, cleared his throat and set down his wine glass with deliberate ceremony. At 62, he still commanded attention in any room, his silver hair perfectly styled and his three-piece suit immaculate even for a family dinner. "Before we continue with dessert, I have an announcement to make," he said, his voice carrying the authority that had built Morrison Industries into a regional powerhouse. "I've been meeting with our estate attorney about succession planning." My stepmother Patricia smiled smugly, while my half-brother Marcus and half-sister Jessica exchanged excited looks. I kept my expression neutral, though my stomach tightened. As you all know, I've built Morrison Industries from a small construction company into what it is today, a $50 million enterprise that employs over 300 people. Dad's eyes swept the table, landing on me last. "I believe in merit-based succession." Marcus leaned forward eagerly. At 30, he'd been groomed his entire life to take over the family business. "What have you decided, Dad?" "The bulk of my estate, the company, the real estate holdings, the investment accounts, will be divided between Marcus and Jessica." Dad's voice was firm and final. "They've both proven themselves capable of carrying on the Morrison legacy." Jessica nodded seriously. At 28, she'd always been the perfect daughter: Harvard MBA, strategic consulting experience, everything Dad valued in a potential successor. "What about Emma?" Patricia asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. All eyes turned to me. At 29, I was the oldest of Dad's children, but also the product of his first marriage, the one that had ended in what he called an expensive lesson in poor judgment. Dad's expression hardened. "Emma has made it clear through her choices that she doesn't value what this family has built. She's chosen to pursue her own path, independent of family support or guidance." "Dad, I've never said I didn't value." "Haven't you?" he interrupted. "You refused the executive position I offered you at Morrison Industries. You turned down the MBA program I was willing to fund. You've spent the last 7 years playing around with computers instead of building something meaningful." Marcus smirked. "The tech entrepreneur phase has been going on for quite a while now, hasn't it, Emma?" "She's living in that tiny apartment downtown," Jessica added with false concern. "I worry she's not being realistic about her future." Patricia nodded sympathetically. "It's admirable to follow your dreams, dear, but at some point you have to face reality." Dad leaned back in his chair, his decision clearly final. "Emma, you don't deserve to inherit anything from this family. You've rejected everything we stand for: hard work, traditional business principles, family loyalty. The inheritance will go to children who understand the value of what I've built." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus and Jessica tried to look sympathetic, but I could see the satisfaction in their eyes. Patricia dabbed at her eyes with her napkin as if this was a difficult but necessary decision. "Does everyone agree with this assessment?" Dad asked, looking around the table. One by one they nodded. Marcus and Jessica nodded enthusiastically. Patricia nodded with feigned sadness. Even my Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert, who rarely spoke up at family gatherings, nodded their agreement. "Then it's settled," Dad announced. "The will has been updated accordingly." I sat quietly for a moment, processing what had just happened. 7 years of building my business, 7 years of polite questions about when I'd get serious about my career, 7 years of being treated like the family disappointment had led to this moment. "Emma." Jessica's voice was gentle, but I could hear the underlying triumph. "Are you okay? I know this must be disappointing, but you'll understand when you're older. Dad's just trying to be responsible." I pulled out my phone and opened my investment app. The numbers glowed back at me. $127,342,891.73 in liquid assets across various portfolios. Without saying a word, I turned the phone around and placed it in the center of the table where everyone could see the screen. The reaction was instantaneous. Dad's wine glass slipped from his fingers, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. Patricia's mouth fell open in a perfect O of shock. Marcus leaned forward so quickly he nearly knocked over his chair. What is that?" Jessica whispered, staring at the numbers on my phone. "That's my investment portfolio," I said calmly. Current value as of market close today, $127.3 million. Dad's face had gone completely pale. That can't be real. I swiped to another screen showing my business holdings. This is my stake in Cloud Vault Technologies, the cybersecurity company I founded 4 years ago. We were acquired by Tech Global last month for $340 million. My 60% ownership stake netted me $204 million before taxes. Marcus was shaking his head frantically. No, Emma, that's impossible. You live in a tiny apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. I live simply because I choose to. The apartment is actually a penthouse that I own along with the entire building. The Honda is reliable and efficient for city driving. I also own a Tesla Model S for longer trips, but I rarely need it since I work from home most days. Patricia found her voice. But we thought your computer business was just a hobby. A phase you were going through. Cloud Vault Technologies employed 847 people before the acquisition. We provided cybersecurity solutions to Fortune 500 companies including 3 major banks, 2 healthcare systems and a government defense contractor. I swiped to another screen showing my real estate holdings. I also own commercial real estate in downtown Portland, Seattle and San Francisco, valued at approximately $78 million combined. Dad was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. How is this possible? Hard work, Dad. Traditional business principles. Everything you taught me, actually. I looked around the table at their stunned faces. The difference is I applied those principles to industries you didn't understand. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. You're worth over $300 million? After taxes and reinvestment, my current net worth is approximately $290 million. But that's not the shocking part. Everyone leaned forward. I swiped to a new screen on my phone. This is the Morrison Industries acquisition proposal I received 3 weeks ago from Preston Development Group. Dad's face went from pale to gray. What acquisition proposal? Preston wants to buy Morrison Industries. They've offered $47 million for the company, which is actually quite generous considering your revenue decline over the past 2 years. Marcus was shaking his head. That's impossible. We haven't heard from any Preston Development Group. That's because they sent their initial inquiry to me. You see, I own Preston Development Group. The silence was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. You own the company that wants to buy Morrison Industries? Dad's voice was hoarse. I founded Preston Development Group 18 months ago as my real estate and construction investment arm. When my research team identified Morrison Industries as an undervalued acquisition target, I had them prepare a formal offer. Patricia's hands were shaking. You were going to buy Williams' company? I was considering it. Morrison Industries has good bones but poor management and outdated technology systems. With proper investment and modernization, it could be worth twice what I offered. Dad seemed to be struggling to breathe. You looked at my company like a business opportunity? I look at all undervalued assets as potential opportunities, Dad. That's how I built my wealth. I turned the phone back toward myself and closed the app. But here's the thing, I never intended to actually purchase Morrison Industries. What do you mean? Marcus asked frantically. I was planning to offer it back to you, Dad, for $1. After I modernized the systems, expanded the client base and secured the company's future, I was going to gift it back to the family. Jessica was crying now. Why would you do that? Because despite everything, you're still my family. I may not have valued your approval, but I've always valued your well-being. Dad's voice was broken. We just disinherited you because we thought you were a failure. I know. But you're more successful than all of us combined. Success isn't a competition, Dad. At least it shouldn't be within a family. Uncle Robert finally spoke up. Emma, why didn't you ever tell us about your achievements? I thought about how to answer that honestly. Because every time I tried to share good news about my business, I was told it wasn't real work, or that I should focus on something more stable. Eventually, I stopped trying to explain what I was building. Aunt Linda was dabbing at her eyes. We thought you were struggling. We were worried about you. I appreciate that you were worried. But none of you ever asked me directly about my finances or my business success. You made assumptions based on my lifestyle choices. Marcus leaned back in his chair looking defeated. The tiny apartment, the old car, the simple clothes. We thought those were signs of failure. They're signs of someone who doesn't define themselves by material possessions. I live comfortably, but I don't live extravagantly. Most of my wealth is invested in growing businesses and real estate, not luxury items. Dad was staring at his hands. Emma, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. Dad, you don't. Yes, I do. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I just disinherited my most successful child because I was too proud and too stubborn to see what you had accomplished. Patricia was sobbing openly now. Emma, we're so sorry. We misjudged everything. The real question, I said gently, is where do we go from here? Jessica wiped her eyes. What do you mean? I mean, do we let this moment divide our family further, or do we use it as an opportunity to build something better? Dad's voice was shaky. What are you proposing? I pulled out a folder from my purse. I had my attorney prepare some documents before I came to dinner tonight. I had a feeling this conversation might happen. Marcus eyed the folder warily. What kind of documents? Trust documents. I'm establishing the Morrison Family Trust with an initial funding of $50 million. The trust will provide for family members' education, healthcare, housing, and business ventures for the next 3 generations. The table was silent except for Patricia's quiet crying. Additionally, I continued, I'm moving forward with the modernization plan for Morrison Industries, but instead of acquiring it, I'm offering a partnership. My company will provide the capital and technology upgrades, while the Morrison family retains ownership and control. Dad was shaking his head in disbelief. After what we just did to you, you're offering to save our business? I'm offering to strengthen our business, Dad. All of our businesses. When family members succeed, the whole family benefits. Jessica reached across the table and took my hand. Emma, this is incredibly generous, but we don't deserve this. Deserve is a complicated word, Jess. Do any of us really deserve the circumstances we're born into? Do we deserve our talents, our opportunities, our lucky breaks? I squeezed her hand. What matters is what we do with what we've been given. Marcus was studying the documents. This trust. It's designed to help family members start businesses? Among other things. Education funding, seed capital for entrepreneurs, emergency assistance, healthcare support. I want our family to be a launching pad for success, not a safety net that enables complacency. Dad wiped his eyes with his napkin. How do we make this right, Emma? How do we rebuild our relationship with you? By starting over. By asking questions instead of making assumptions. By celebrating each other's successes instead of dismissing them. Uncle Robert spoke up again. Emma, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you happy? With all this success, all this wealth, are you happy? I considered the question seriously. I'm satisfied with my work and I'm proud of what I've built. But the happiest moments in my life have always been family moments, birthdays, holidays, celebrations. That's what I've missed most over the past few years. Patricia looked up through her tears. We've missed you too, dear. We didn't know how to bridge the gap. The gap was built on misunderstanding, I said. We can tear it down the same way. Dad reached for the trust documents. May I look at these? Of course. But Dad, there's one condition to all of this. The table tensed. No more assumptions about anyone's life or choices. If you want to know how someone is doing, ask them directly. If they share good news, celebrate it. If they share challenges, offer support. We be a family that lifts each other up. Jessica nodded emphatically. Absolutely. Emma, I'm so sorry for how dismissive we've been. We all made mistakes, Jess. The important thing is learning from them. Marcus was reading through the trust documents. This is incredibly comprehensive. You've thought of everything. I've had time to think about what kind of family I want us to be. Tonight just gave me the motivation to make it happen. Dad set down the documents and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since I was a child, pure pride. Emma, I need you to know something. I've never been more proud of you than I am right now. Because of the money? No. Because of the woman you've become. The grace you're showing us, the generosity, the way you're handling this situation. That's not about wealth. That's about character. Patricia nodded through her tears. We raised an incredible daughter, and then we were too blind to see what we had accomplished. You raised all of us to be strong and independent, I said. Maybe too independent sometimes. But the foundation was solid. Aunt Linda raised her wine glass. To Emma and to second chances. As we toasted, I felt something I hadn't experienced with my family in years. Genuine connection and mutual respect. Later, as we moved to the living room for dessert and coffee, Dad pulled me aside. Emma, can I ask you something? Anything. What made you decide to establish the family trust? You could have just walked away after tonight. I thought about his question, looking around the room where I'd grown up, where I'd learned about business and hard work and family loyalty, even if those lessons had gotten complicated over the years. Because this is where I learned that success means nothing if you don't have people to share it with. You taught me that, Dad, even if you forgot it for a while. He hugged me tightly. I'm sorry it took nearly losing you for me to remember. You didn't lose me, Dad. I've been here all along. You just weren't looking in the right place. Over the next few hours, the atmosphere in the house completely transformed. Instead of the tense, formal dinner we'd started with, we found ourselves having the kind of honest, warm family conversation we hadn't shared in years. Marcus talked about his struggles with feeling like he could never live up to Dad's expectations. Jessica shared her fears about taking over family business responsibilities she wasn't sure she was ready for. Dad admitted that he'd been so focused on protecting what he'd built that he'd stopped seeing the potential for growth and change. Emma, Jessica said as we were getting ready to leave, I have one more question. What's that? The cybersecurity company you built. How did you know that industry was going to be so lucrative? I smiled, remembering the countless hours I'd spent researching market trends and technological developments while my family thought I was playing with computers. I didn't know for certain. But I studied the data, identified the trends, and made calculated risks based on solid research. The same principles Dad taught me about construction. You study the foundation, plan carefully, and build something that will last. Dad nodded slowly. I should have recognized those principles in your work. Maybe. But I also should have been better at explaining what I was building in terms you could understand. As I drove home that night, I thought about the evening's revelations. In a way, getting disinherited had been the best thing that could have happened to our family. It had forced all of us to confront our assumptions, our prejudices, and our failures to truly see each other. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Thank you for showing us what real family leadership looks like. I'm proud to be your father. I smiled, pulling into the parking garage of my building, the building I owned in the heart of downtown, with a view of the city I'd helped reshape through my investments. Tomorrow we'd start the real work of rebuilding our family relationships. There would be legal documents to finalize, business partnerships to structure, and years of misunderstandings to work through. But tonight, for the first time in years, I felt like I had my family back. And that was worth more than all the investment portfolios in the world. As I walked into my penthouse apartment, I looked out at the city lights and smiled. Sometimes the best gifts came disguised as the worst moments. Tonight, getting disinherited had led to something far more valuable than any inheritance. A family that finally understood the difference between success and worth, between wealth and value, between what you have and who you are. And that understanding, I knew, would be the foundation for building something even better together.